David Purdum is covering sports gambling, sports betting, industry reporter, and joining us now. Recap these gambling allegations here with Phil Mickelson. Fact and fiction in this for you?
I think there's a lot of fact in there. Billy Walters is widely considered the most successful bettor ever in American history. As you mentioned, he's extremely well connected, and he seems to have receipts here. He had the exact number of bets that Phil made of the $200,000 range, exact number he made of the $100,000 range. And in total, as you mentioned, him over the last 3 decades, Walter believes that Mickelson got down over $1 billion in bets with a net loss of $100 million. Thing that really stood out to me, he said the only other person that I know that they got that much money down, that bet that much money over that time frame was himself. So he's basically saying Phil Mickelson is the second biggest sports bettor in the last 30 years in the U.S.
But he could afford it, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
100%. And Walters acknowledges that too. It's his money. He never thought that he would have any trouble collecting if there was any sort of debts, and they had a partnership where they would pay bets back and forth. But Walters was never concerned that, and made that clear in the book that Phil was a bettor. He had the money to do it, and that's what he chose to do.
There's insider trading involved in this. Billy Walters went to prison because of this. How much of that is on Phil Mickelson of what happened to the author of this book?
Well, Walters believes that Mickelson could have testified in his case, and that would have helped him, given him a better chance of staying out of prison. Walters maintains his innocence, as he did not relay any sort of inside information. It was a stock trade, Dean Foods, a dairy company, Texas, that they mentioned back and forth. Mickelson declined to testify, said he was going to take the fifth, and that rubbed Walters the wrong way.
And then they sent him to jail, and while he was in jail, his daughter committed suicide, and he said, had he not been in jail, he thinks he could have prevented that. But athletes betting on themselves in golf, why should we have a problem with that? Boxers are able to bet on themselves.
Well, they've now, in a lot of the states, they don't allow anybody that's involved in a sport to place wagers on that event, including on themselves. And the reason for that is because, let's say an athlete bets on them to win a golf tournament, bets $500,000, and then the next tournament he doesn't bet. Well, is he trying just as hard this time, or maybe the intensity isn't there, so he's not trying as hard? So they think it just kind of impacts the integrity a little bit, just the effort, and it adds kind of a question mark around everything. In my opinion, it just kind of opens up a can of worms that's unnecessary and is a net negative on this if you were to allow athletes to bet on events that they are involved in.
David Purdum, ESPN sports betting industry reporter. It feels like we're headed towards something really bad here. They're just it's hard not to bet. It's there. It's constant. And you're seeing this with Iowa and Iowa State athletes involved in this. Where are we headed? Like, how do we police this to ensure that you don't have something that is going to be nefarious?
Well, the theory behind the legalization and the regulation is that what we're trying to do. We have more visibility into the betting market right now than we ever had. Yeah. We don't know in the past if all of these transactions were happening because it was taking place in an underground bookmaker, or an offshore sports book, and they don't open up their books to show you, hey, this guy's betting, he shouldn't be. We're in this environment of regulation where more people are watching. They can see these anomalies, and we're catching people. There's an academic theory that I kind of like to recite a little bit. It's about adaption, and anytime illicit activity like betting is brought into a regulated environment, society struggles at the beginning. Okay, what can I do? What can I not do? What can I get away with? What's going to get me in trouble? Eventually they adapt, right? So it takes about 5-10 years. They start to learn. We start seeing all these cases people made examples of, and society will adapt. So I hope we're kind of in that adaption period, but you're right. Things are not going well right now. We're seeing way too many kids risk their playing eligibility by betting on games they're involved in.
Which sport or sports are most vulnerable?
College basketball. That's always been the one that has been a target for point shaving. You can control a college basketball game by just getting one or two players compared to they have more control compared to a football game.
Well, let me ask you then, David. I'm gonna pay. I need you to fix a game.
Okay.
How do you go about fixing that game?
Well, you'd want to spread the money out among several sports books around the nation. Probably would like to do it in one of the offshore sports books where you could protect your identity, or with a local bookmaker.
But how do I
And you,
find the players who will be, complicit?
well, you go to a college and let's say, hey, I know you were betting on one of these sites. I don't want to get you in trouble, but maybe we can work out some sort of deal. You shave some points in this game, you miss a couple free throws here or there, and hey, we'll keep it between ourselves. This happened in the GMAC Bowl back in the mid 2000s with a Toledo running back. He eventually admitted in court that he fumbled football intentionally during that game for $500.
Mm.
I mean, $500, you're a college kid, that's a lot of money. That takes your kids out, your girlfriend out for a date.
Well, and that's the thing. You got to get to the most vulnerable, and that's what I always worry about with this. But, Vegas does a great job policing the lines when you see some, you had the Alabama baseball situation where how you think that's not going to, raise red flags. And I'm sure these Iowa and Iowa State kids who are betting probably thinking, oh, we're at Iowa and Iowa State. They got other things to worry about. These are small bets here. And then you find out that there's a lot more to it. It's not necessarily the size of the bet, it's that you're betting. And, that when it comes to they're going to take away your scholarship, it's not, hey, you bet $50. You're betting on your team or against your team or whatever it might be. It just feels like we're headed down that road somehow, somewhere. Can you find a way that NFL players could gamble, but almost the NFL knows it? They would monitor it. They would say, this is the only way you can gamble. So there's no gray area. There's no nothing. And you just tell them, you gamble this way, and we'll let you do that during the season. Is there anything that you see down the road with the NFL players?
Certainly not betting on anything related to the NFL. Players are allowed to bet on other sports. They can bet on a baseball game or an NBA playoff game or whatever, but they just can't do it while at work. So I don't think you should ever be allowed to bet on something you're involved with. There's too much information that you have access to that the other public bettors do not. There's just too many things that, again, I just think it's a net negative to allow somebody to bet on an event they're involved in.
What's your favorite gambling story? Whether it's a bad beat or you can leave out names, but.
Yeah, I went down to Las Vegas a few years ago during the rodeo, and there's these professional bettors that will go around and they dress up as cowboys, look like they're coming in out of town, and they go in there and try to dupe the sports books by letting them. A lot of these guys have been cut off by the sports books. They beat them by so much they won't let them bet. And so we drove around, and sure enough, he would go up there in this cowboy hat and jeans and a big showcase belt buckle, and we would be allowed to place wagers that he would never win. So that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, and we all have a bad beat. When I gambled, I tell my audience it was Packers-Bears, and I lost on a blocked field goal that was taken in for a touchdown. Chester Markle was the field goal kicker, and he caught the deflection and ran it in for a touchdown. He was going to kick field goal. I was going to win. My bookie had the Saints when Tom Dempsey was had the field goal, the longest field goal in NFL history at the time. Everybody has one of those. Yeah, I mean, we do get those where we win one of these bets, but usually it's a bad beat that you seem to. It hadn't left me, and it's been almost 50 years. So
I certainly remember mine. 2000, Kentucky, Florida, college football. Florida's favored. Steve Spurrier. Kentucky's covering the game the whole way. I think it was getting +7 or something. Florida's down to the last drive, late in the fourth quarter, up 4. Kentucky, sure, they're just going to kneel down, right?
Yeah.
Nope. Spurrier goes play action, touchdown, covers the spread with like 2 seconds left or something. It was crazy.
If you ran into Spurrier, would you say anything to him?
Well, he talked about it afterwards, the game, saying, well, they were blitzing us still, so we had to take advantage of that. So, yeah, I might bring that up.
Good to talk to you, David. Thank you for joining us again.
You too, Dan.
That's David Purdum, ESPN sports betting industry reporter.